Hey guys, welcome back to Check Your Leader TV. Today we're going to be starting, it might, well, this might become a series of videos, or it might just be a one-off, but it's a quick tactical tips for playing GDA version 2. Today we're going to talk about the use of artillery, attacking on a narrow front, and localized numerical superiority. So they're the three little points that I want to hit on today. I'd always planned to do this little series, offer these little tips. I've held off doing it. One, it comes off, it might come off a little bit arrogant. That's not the intention. This is what I'm going to share with you here is nothing you couldn't figure out in time yourself after playing a few games, I suspect. I have the advantage of being a soldier for 33 years, a military instructor for a goodly proportion of that, at least 15 years. And so I'm just sharing my knowledge on military tactics, I guess, and how they're applicable to GDA 2. You can do things in this game that are borne out by historical precedent. So I guess that's a fancy way of saying whatever they did historically during the Napoleonic Wars, if you do this in this game, you should reap some kind of success. If you don't win every game, at least you'll feel like you gave it a good shot. So that's what we're about today. This should be a short video. It was prompted predominantly, there was a chap, Alex, can't think of his surname. I'm terrible with names. Been rattled a few times, blown up and shit. So I never forget a face, but I'm terrible with names. Terribly sorry about that. But Alex from Storm of Steel, I think he has a YouTube channel, Storm of Steel. And so basically he asked a question about artillery in the attack, and it just doesn't seem to be working for him in GDA 2. And I've offered well, essentially what I'm offering here, I've offered there verbally, but I'm using this as a video because a picture paints 1,000 words, and it's much easier to show something than to try to explain it via the written word sometimes. Whatever advice I offer here, it's with the caveat that there's no guarantees of success in anything. When I used to teach young officers in the Australian military, one of the things we would do is they'd have to present their plans. We would present them a tactical problem. They'd have to go away, do what they call IMAP, the individual military appreciation process, and they would present their plans to me, and then I would critique it and tell them whether or not the plan was good or bad or indifferent or whatever. But I always used to say to them afterwards, after we went through this exercise, I'd always gather them together and say, listen up, young men, young gentlemen and ladies, here's the thing you have to understand about war. You will come up with 3 plans or courses of action that the enemy might conduct. You'll base your plans on one of those, so either plan 1, 2, or 3. But as soon as the bullets start flying, I can guarantee the enemy will be presenting you with plan number 4. So no matter how well you try to predict what the enemy will do, you can't predict it every time. You might come close, but you'll never be exact. So with that all in mind, let's have a look at this first quick tips for quick tactical tips for GDA 2. I should add that these should work for any Napoleonic rule system if the rule system is worth its weight in paper. Okay, let's go. I could pull all my miniatures out, setting up a table, but at the moment I'm faffing around with some ancient rules, so I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to use is Command and Colors Napoleonic, the board game. Or is it a board game? It's a war game. Anyway, so I'm going to use these counters to represent using 15mm miniatures on a 6 foot by 4 foot table. Okay, so each one of these hexes is equivalent to about 6 inches. So 4 and a bit foot wide, and 6.5 foot. 4.5 foot deep, 6.5 foot wide table. And essentially, I think that the ground scale looks pretty close to the mark. Right, so with that said, Each one of these four bases of infantry. So that's a unit there, a unit there, a unit there, a unit there. 2 bases for an artillery battery, and a brigade skirmish line. Of little bases separated. If they're in column formation, they're 2 up and 2 back, and if they're line, they're side by side. So it should be all pretty much self-explanatory. I've just put together a table here. So basically we have woods and high ground on the left, on the French left, where there's a woods in the center, there's a BUA over here, some high ground at the back here, and so on and so forth. I'll talk more about the deployment of the Russian troops and the French as we go forward, but mainly what we're talking about, the first part, we're going to talk about attacking on a narrow front. What do I mean by attacking on a narrow front, and why is it a good idea? And essentially, attacking on a narrow front means you're making your main effort, you're concentrating on a narrow axis of attack as opposed to attacking across broadly across the front of the enemy. There's advantages and disadvantages to attacking on a narrow front. The obvious disadvantage is it can leave a flank open. And if you're going to attack on a narrow front, you should do it on a flank, not in the center. Attacking on a narrow front in the center risks a double envelopment. Attacking on a front on a flank, well, the edge of the table I know it's arbitrary, but what this would normally be would be the rest of the battlefield here, and you'd have other regiments, brigades, divisions, corps, etc. on this right flank. So you have a secure flank, and you're willing to have an open flank, and away you go. And you can mitigate the problem by attacking in echelon. So these 2 brigades are going to go forward here, attack on this narrow front here, and the off-table brigades, they will come as if the enemy attempts to envelop you. Off-table brigades will come on here, echeloned, and counter any kind of envelopment. And normally, in the space of a simple game of GDA 2, 1 brigade coming on here, probably the cavalry, covering this flank would be enough to keep these guys at bay while you go to work with these chaps. And then the final brigade comes up as your reserve to exploit any success that you have or cover any failure you might have. So let's get into it. I've set the groundwork and let's talk about it. Essentially what we have here is 2 divisions, a French division on the bottom end of the table and a Russian division on the top end of the table. The Russians are defending. Scouting's been done. The Russians, not knowing where the French will be attacking from, have to basically defend on a broad front. So they've basically got an infantry brigade here, 1 battalion in garrison, 1 battalion behind the garrison to support it, 2 battalions in line, and their brigade skirmish line out, and an attached artillery battery here. This brigade here is deployed behind the woods where their brigade skirmish line is garrisoning the woods. And then we have the 3rd Infantry Brigade here, again garrisoning one of the towns, one of the BUAs, and then 2 battalions back, 1 in the garrison, 1 forward supporting the battery, and then the brigade skirmish line out. Seems like a perfectly sensible deployment, and sensibly he's kept his cavalry off table. This is a bit of a dicey proposition here, because if these units here were to retreat or withdraw, there's no one for them to rally behind. But you could argue that the plan is maybe he brings his cavalry up and makes that, brings the cavalry on at an appropriate time, and that becomes the line behind which these guys can rally if necessary. The French, for their part, noticed that they've decided that they're going to attack the right flank as opposed to the left, because the objective of the scenario is they have to capture either that BUA or this one. This is the closest one, so that's the clear objective in this case. So this is the scenario. Once we're all deployed, what the French do is they're going to put 2 infantry brigades on table, side by side, with both batteries, this battery from this brigade here, this battery from this brigade here, both deployed on the high ground, and they've kept their a brigade of infantry off table in reserve, and they've kept their brigade of cavalry off table in reserve. So that's the starting point for the French. We're just going to assume that the quality is comparable across the line. And so this is the scenario that we're going to look at. Now, the first question you're going to ask is, why keep brigades off table? Now, I'm glad you've asked. Now, the biggest mistake I see people making, and it's a mistake that I think, I could be wrong, so if you make up your own mind. But from what I think is a mistake is everybody putting all their troops on the table right from the get-go. And I understand why this is done. It's very much wargamers disease. You want to get all your toys on the table right from the get-go. But in GDA 2, that's not a smart thing to do. Why? The reason is every brigade on table has the potential of becoming hesitant. And every brigade that's on table is a command drain. You have to attend to it in some form. If you have an ADC and it's on the table, you don't want it going hesitant. So you're going to have to allocate an ADC to that brigade if you want to make sure it doesn't go hesitant. You could just trust that everything will just work out fine, and mathematically the odds are that it won't be. But there's also a good chance that it will be. So if there's a brigade on table, you have to attend to it. Also, if there's a brigade on table, it can draw fire. If you've got a cavalry brigade on table and it's not actually doing cavalry stuff, it's just standing around, it could be a nice juicy target for enemy artillery to fire upon. And cavalry just standing there getting shot is absolutely criminal. So if you don't need the cavalry on the table, don't put it on the table. Keep it off. Bring it on when you need it. That's exactly the way cavalry was used. Now, there are some famous examples. I'm thinking of the Grenadiers, Cheval de la Garde Impériale. At one particular battle, they were just standing there getting shot at, and their colonel famously said, "Heads up, Grenadiers, they're cannonballs, not turds." The point is, though, that's not smart. It's not wise to do that, particularly with good horse flesh and well-trained troopers. So if they're not needed on the table, keep them off. The other thing, of course, is by keeping troops off the table, you're always keeping your enemy guessing. Where are they coming on? Is he doing a flank march with them? What's the story? I don't know where they are. So if you keep something off the table, he has to keep something in reserve to counter it. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about attacking on a narrow front. Here we have a Russian division deployed. Now, by attacking on a narrow front, what that means is all the effort's going to be concentrated over here. Why is that the case? Because if the Russians decide that they want to go on the offensive, they're going to have to give a redeploy order and then move these guys to envelop them on the right. The gamble for the French is that they can get in here, break this before these guys can have any real effect on the battle. By massing the batteries on the high ground here, that permits them to concentrate both of these batteries onto that one Russian battery there. Statistically, that means that these French batteries here should either destroy or drive this battery off before they in turn lose the firefight. So let's assume that the French player has decided that he's going to concentrate all his effort on neutralizing the Russian artillery, because that will give him more freedom of maneuver in his attack on this objective here, the main effort, which is the Russian left flank, the French right. Now here's the key points or tactical tips that I want to give in relation to this. As you can see, the obvious problems for the French are the garrison itself. He's going to be catching bullets as he comes in to attack that garrison. Also, this battery here can be a problem as firing on him as he comes in. And then there's this brigade skirmish line here to deal with. Now, this brigade is predominantly light infantry, but even if it wasn't, being French, they can always break off one battalion into skirmish order. So the first thing they would do is either if they're veterans, break these into skirmish order and have an independent battalion supporting these guys as they clear out the woods. If they're not capable of doing that, if they're not veterans, what they do is they would go forward with this brigade skirmish line and accept the fact that they're going to be at a bit of a disadvantage, obviously, because they're firing into cover and these guys are firing. It could be lining the edge of the woods and therefore not firing out of cover, but firing from the edge of the woods, so not suffering any penalties. That being the case, as soon as they lose a single base here, they feed this entire battalion into the brigade skirmish line, which takes them up to their maximum of 7. Whatever the bottom line is, all the fire from here is being neutralised by this brigade skirmish line. Whilst that's going on, or even before that goes on, what the French should be doing is concentrating the fire of these 2 batteries to neutralise this battery. Once this battery is taken care of, driven in or driven off or destroyed, that's when these battalions can go forward. So we fast forward a few turns, and now what we have is the French infantry columns advancing on this objective here, and these guys advancing on this objective here, which is the Russian infantry line. The bottom line, this is all one brigade. So we essentially have 2 infantry brigades attacking one. But what has to be noted here is the big advantage of just having 2 brigades on the table as opposed to the Russians having 3 is you have more ADCs to expend on less troops. Also, with 2 brigades on the table and all those extra ADCs, you're going to have less chance of brigades going hesitant, and that means more chance that you're going to have the initiative, which is imperative if you're the attacker, because you usually want to get your licks in before the enemy gets to shoot. Now, the other concern is when the Russian cavalry is committed, the advantage of being an attacker is you're going to be coming forward in columns, and columns versus cavalry is not a terrible situation, especially if the columns are supported. Completely different if you're in line. That's not good. But like I said, if you're going forward in column, it's not too much of a deal, too much of a problem. Of course, like I said, these guys here, one of these battalions could well be now an independent light infantry battalion supporting the brigade skirmish line, fighting in the woods and tying down the Russians in this sector. Now, everything I'm saying here, none of this is guaranteed. Is a guaranteed success. There's no guarantees it's all going to work out, but nothing's guaranteed. As you'll notice, also, I'm keeping a lane in here for at least 1 battery to provide fire support. That means once this battery is taken care of, this battery can then switch to providing fire to them. If this battery in a counter battery duel is the one that's got the worst of it, this one could always do emergency limber withdrawal to the rear. So we get that out of the way, and this battery limbers up, moves across, and could even limber up and come forward into this position here. But if you've been fortunate enough that both batteries are in good shape, then you can have 1 battery up here providing fire support. This one might be able to move off to cover off this way in case of any movement by the enemy over here, or even might limber up and move forward to provide direct fire support to either of these brigades that need it. If this enemy on the left, if they start coming forward, that's when you can commit your cavalry, but you keep your final brigade off table for as long as you possibly can. And like I said, you could, if these guys come forward, you could either commit an infantry brigade here to hold, or you could commit the cavalry brigade to threaten an envelopment on the left. Either way, when you're attacking on a narrow front, what you're trying to achieve is a localized numerical superiority, as opposed to trying to go toe-to-toe across the entire line. If you try to go toe-to-toe across the entire line, invariably, as an attacker, you'll come off worse. You have to orchestrate a numerical superiority in one particular area. And this, by doing this, attacking on a narrow front is the ideal way to do it. And by doing that, it permits you to mass your artillery into the one point of decision. Okay, so that's the first video in these quick tactical tips for GDA 2. There's a previous video I did with Carlo from over in Western Australia, when GDA 2 was initially released, where we talked about tactical tips. We also had some pointers there that were sent to us from Dave Brown. So I encourage you to have a look at that video as well. I'll put a link in the description of this video. If you like what you saw here, find these videos useful, please leave a comment. If I get a good response, then I can make more videos, maybe on cavalry tactics, defensive tactics, core level games, tactical advice for games such as that, and then maybe even to grand tactical games as well, using map movement and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, that'll wrap it up for this one. I didn't want it to go on for too long, and already it's gone longer than I thought it would. So we'll leave it there. Like, share and subscribe if you find this interesting, and I really value your feedback, and any comments that you might have, criticisms or whatever. If I've missed something or something glaringly obvious, by all means ask a question, and I'm sure I can provide an answer, or at least address the concern you might have. And other than that, we'll wrap it up there, and I will catch you on the next one. You, McQuay.